But welcome everyone. Tonight's an exciting night. I'm gonna read a little intro here that with the help of Kathy Garza, who's in the audience here tonight, who also is a TVI. So my name is Casey Greer. I'm here with some great panelists. They're going to introduce themselves momentarily, but welcome to the call. I was just going to read that literacy media refers to the tools and strategies students will use to access information, not just in the school environment, but in the home and community also. Typically sighted children learn in a multitude of ways, primarily using print, but auditory input and hands-on experiences are also a great supplement to reading and writing. Our kiddos with albinism are no different. Hence the I in IEP. Everyone with albinism is an individual and there's no one size fits all. We all have different acuities. Nystagmus and photophobia come into play, and we all use our vision differently in different environments. And our panelists are going to share some insights about making the decisions about the variety of media available to students with visual impairments and the role that evaluation plays in deciding what will work best for any given student. So without further ado, I would love our amazing panelists to introduce themselves and kind of say how they got started in this education standpoint with visual impairments. Some people on our panel have albinism, some are parents of children with albinism, some are professionals, and well, they're all professionals, but so let's get started. Charlotte, why don't you go first?
Sure. My name is Charla McKeon. I have a 12-year-old daughter named Hayden, and she has OCA. I am also a Brailleist, so I Braille curriculum for local school districts. And I actually work with Kathy Dahlbeck, who's also on the panel as her Brailleist. And Hayden is a multimedia user. So I kind of have some perspectives from all the angles as a parent of a child who uses multimedia, and then also as a professional who produces the multimedia as well. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Charla, and we'll go straight on to Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Dahlbeck. I am a teacher of the visually impaired and an orientation and mobility specialist. I've been actually teaching for 37 years. My first 15 years, I was actually a special ed teacher, and I did a lot of. I actually worked in a more of a self-contained type classroom, but I was often pulled out to go work with other students with either autism or behavior issues. And I was in a very small district, and we ended up getting two students, actually three students from the same family who had RP. And my director came to me and asked me if I would go get my vision certificate. And I had no idea what this meant at the time, but I said, sure, I'll do it. I'd do anything, right? So it took me 2 years to get my vision certificate and my O&M certificate. And I went through the last program at Stephen F. Austin where they would let you go through both the programs at the same time, which I understand after doing it, why they want you to do one and then the other. So in 2 years, then I got my vision certificate and my O&M certificate. And I've been teaching kids with visual impairments in the public school system, usually birth to 21. Sometimes not birth to 3. It depends on how many there are, but that's what I've been doing, and that's what I'm doing right now in Washington State.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Next, Kayla.
Hi, my name is Kayla Hamlin. I am a teacher for the visually impaired as well as a certified orientation and mobility specialist. I also have a son with albinism. He is 8. He is also a dual media user. He is learning Braille. His primary medium is large print though. So I do kind of have it from all angles. Before I was a TVI, I taught in a general education setting, kindergarten, first grade mostly. And now I work at the Ohio State School for the Blind, teaching kindergarten, first and second grade. And the majority of my class is dual media learners. And I have I just got a new student today. Our max is 8 students, but I am up to 6 now. So yeah, they keep me busy. And I've been doing that for, gosh, is it 7 years now? It kind of runs together. I love how Kathy actually knows her her years because I can never keep it straight. But what got me into it was my son. I was in education and I wanted something a little bit different than just gen ed. And once we got his diagnosis and I started learning more about it, I kind of just dove right in.
Great, thank you. And Rebecca.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Smith. I'm a teacher for the visually impaired and I work in one school district in Central Ohio. I'm lucky to only be in one right now. I used to do most of our state actually. But I am a person with albinism. I primarily use print as my medium, but I will use some technology as well. I don't use Braille. I didn't learn it as a child, but I did learn it as a teacher for the visually impaired. So I have access to it. I just prefer not to use it myself. I'm also my district's assistive technology specialist. So that's a interesting part of my role that I haven't had previously until the past 2 years.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you all, amazing panelists, for being here. I do want to let everyone know who is joining us. We will be taking questions, so please drop your questions in the chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat, or at the end. Right now, I have everyone's cameras turned off for this panel portion, but at the end, we can all turn our cameras back on, and you can ask your questions that way as well. And we are recording, just to let everyone know. So thank you all for being here. I know you each have different things to share and say. We can start off though with this kind of general question of, could each of you tell us a little bit about what dual media or multimedia means to you, and give the audience a little more context about the topic. Let's go, Kathy, let's start with you this time.
Okay, so yeah, I can tell you what multimedia means to me. We used to call it dual media, but then when we had all this new great technology come in, I just started calling it multimedia, which I think is more accurate. So when I have a student who has a visual impairment and I do the evaluation, I look at all the things. I look at their visual acuity. I look at their photophobia. I look at how their depth perception is. Are they seeing double vision? What's their eye fatigue level? Also, the social emotional state that they're in is extremely important as well. So we look at all of those things, and with the parent and the teachers and myself and sometimes the student's pretty young and they're still really, getting a hold of their own eye condition. We determine what we're going to use as learning media for the student. And there are times where we'll use large print and audio, visual, digital, and sometimes we'll have Braille and large print and audio, visual, digital. And then once we kind of determine, let's say the student, we determine the student gets print, Braille, and audio, visual, digital. We'll look at what are the tools that we're going to use to access the audio, visual, digital. So there's always multiple strategies for this. So, you might have a textbook. Let's say it's a middle school kid. Let's say you have a textbook and the student has access to the textbook, but we have a standard size print. So then we have to determine, okay, based on what we determine, the student can have print, Braille, or audio, visual, digital, and other means. We determine. I usually give them more than one type of textbook, so they'll get the standard print, maybe with the magnifier, but that isn't the main way this child's going to access that book. There might be an online version of that book. But it also depends on, with that online version, is it working well enough for that student to access it, given the tools? Like, let's say it's in Canvas. Sometimes the speech to text doesn't work well in Canvas. So then we have to provide another way for the student to be able to access the book. So maybe we'll go ahead and download it onto Bookshare. And sometimes, with my super duper Braille list, sometimes she'll put it into a PDF and make it so the student can use it as a PDF on a screen reader. I've recently learned about Apple Books and that you can put a PDF in there. So there's just a lot of different ways that we look at how the student is going to be able to access their curriculum.
Great. And Kayla and Charla, you both have children who are using dual media. Kayla, do you have any more to add to that about kind of what dual media means to you?
I mean, Kathy pretty much said most of it. The few things that I would add to is, at least at my level, a lot of my students, they're still learning their vision. They're still learning about their vision. So it's a lot of trial and error for us. And I think that is true with every student. But a lot of times we'll do a lot with the regular size print, and then we use a lot of CCTVs because I want them to be able to have that technology piece, as technology is growing and growing and growing, and it's becoming such a prevalent part of our students and everybody's lives. So I'm trying to do as much building in of the tech pieces as I can, even as early on as I can. In terms of with my child, we went back and forth with the Braille, and I think that's always one of the biggest questions. And for him, it was more a worry of the eye fatigue. We started him off, he was doing really well tactily, and then he really enjoyed it too. So we brought him in even when he was first grade, and I asked him if he enjoyed it, and when he said, "Yes, Mom, I want to keep doing Braille," I was like, "Okay, done." So he is mostly large print, and he does use his magnifier, and then he also uses a lot of his technology. He does not do as much with the audio yet, in terms of audio with listening to things. Most of it is just the reading, or being able to zoom in, and just using those tech pieces. But he does have that tool in his toolbox, and it's something that he is interested in. I think it will benefit him. However, as a parent, if he really was against it and it became more of a battle than I felt was necessary for him, I probably wouldn't have pushed it more. And as a personal opinion, just because with his visual acuity and taking everything into account that his TVI did, and the assessments that we'll get into here, we had to make that decision. So, but he enjoys it and he is loving it, and so hopefully that just gives him another tool that he can go back on if he needs it.
And Charlotte, what about your perspective?
Yeah, I think similar story. So Hayden has double vision on top of her visual impairment from albinism. So her vision's a little bit more complex than the average kiddo with albinism. However, she does use multimedia. So she uses large print, Braille, and then also digital. Digital's probably her favorite if you were to ask her. She loves using digital because she can zoom in as big as she wants and it doesn't get distorted, and it's just really nice. And then she doesn't get anything in, she's not supposed to get anything in size like regular size 10 to 12 font. And so everything's handed to her either in large print or Braille. She really only uses Braille though for larger readings. So like her novel studies in English, because she's a middle schooler, so things like that. But she doesn't use Braille for her worksheets and all of that. That's all large print or digital. And we found that that is a good balance, so that she doesn't get frustrated with the Braille because she's not quite fast enough right now to be able to access it super quickly. She is learning how to use a Braille display, which I think will increase her access to Braille when she wants to read books, which is really cool, and a technology that we can talk about later with parents that aren't familiar with what that tool is. But yeah, so I think she's successfully doing multimedia in middle school. She loves having options. And again, like Kayla said, having the tool in the toolbox and, in her back pocket. So if she needs something, she knows how to use it is super, super helpful.
Great. And Rebecca, what about you?
I think all three of these ladies have kind of summed up what I was going to say. And Kayla and Charla both said it in their answer, the tool in the toolbox. It comes down to how big is your toolbox and how many tools do you have in there? and how many do you have access to? A lot of different students that I work with will use different things for different things. And it's just determining which one is going to be the best one that they are mostly still learning.
Awesome, thank you. And you know, in your experience, how are these decisions made? And what insight do you have about the role each team member plays in making these decisions? So kind of whoever wants to, we don't all four have to answer every question, but if any of you feel like you want to touch on that specifically of how is this decision made for each, I mean, each kid is very individual. Anyone have insight on that?
Well, I can go ahead and talk about that.
Sure.
When we decide a student, when we sit down and determine what the media will be, I always try with the greatest respect to have like deep respect for the child and the parent. And I listen to what they want first and listen to what how they've done it and how it's worked in their environment. And then I put in my opinion. Um, if I think that the student might need something in addition to what the parent has already said, I'll let them know that. But to me, it's very important that the child and the parent. Now, again, sometimes the child's too young. That we work with the parent because there's so much involved with you know, the family dynamics and just where the parent is on accepting their and going through that the actually the grieving process of their child's vision. So for me, the most important part is that socio or that social emotional piece with the parent and the child. And then I bring in what I think is going to be important for the child. There are times that I actually have felt like a child needed Braille, but we decided not to because the, um, the parent and maybe the child, along with it were not a place where it was good for them to be able to have that as part of their program yet. Sometimes they'll come along and they'll want it, and sometimes they don't. It really depends, but for me, it's so important that the parent is heavily included in the decision making with this. And sometimes the child, I have had high school kids that have come in and they're a big part of it. Like I recently had one move into our district and um, she's really grieving her condition because it's progressive. And so, you know, fortunately she is okay with Braille, but, you know, you can say things, and then when you're in the environment, you know, just sort of break down because maybe you don't wanna use this tool or that tool or use Braille in this situation. And so there's a lot of consideration that you have to take in when you're deciding multimedia and actual going out and implementing it into the school and in life.
Great. And Kathy Garza says in the chat, yes, yes, yes to all of this, Kathy. I love it so much. It really sounds like you're listening to everyone involved as you make the decisions. Yes, definitely. Anyone else have anything to add to that question? I can reread it if you'd like, but just, you know, what are some insights in how these decisions are made? Anyone else have something to add to that?
I just wanted to chime in as being on the other side, actually of Kathy. So my daughter actually was Kathy's student for the last 9 years. And she sees Kathy privately periodically now, still, because Kathy moved out of our district, which we're very sad about. But luckily we still have access to her. But it does make a huge difference when a TVI and a parent can collaborate successfully. I feel like, and I know it's not always an option. Sometimes there's parents that don't have the capacity in that moment for various reasons. They could be economic reasons, they could be language barriers, there could be lots of things that can cause stress between a parent and a team. But for the most part, I think it really just makes a world of difference when the parent and the TVI can look at what the child needs and decide together. And then you've got that support from home as well as at school at the same time. And it makes kind of this dreamy situation take place, which is why I believe Hayden is so successful in her multimedia use, is because she was getting really good support at school, and then she was getting really good support at home, and it made it really consistent. So I would just say that's from a parental point of view. It's really helpful to forge those relationships. I would say what makes a lot of difference is not going into a meeting if you don't have to as a quote unquote mama bear, because not all the professionals are out to get you. And I think that's really important to remember. A lot of professionals are underneath a lot of stress, and they're overworked, and they do want to do what's best for your child. And sometimes all they need is a parent to arrive at a meeting with a smile on their face and just say, hi, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And then the stress just leaves the room. And I know in some cases that's not the case. I've also been in that type of situation as well. So I know that it can go both ways, but I do encourage everybody to walk into a meeting with positive intentions and not be too defensive all like right at the beginning.
Yes, that is a good point. And Kim Avila is in the chat saying such good points. Sometimes it's also the OT, a gen ed teacher, or an admin who opposes Braille instruction when the student has usable vision. Yes, good point. And then Kathy said, go Charlotte. So I'm keeping an eye on the chat. If anybody has questions, just definitely send them along. We'll get to them at the end. Rebecca or Kayla, anything else to add to that? We
I
can
don't
move
think
on
so. I
if
think
not,
they
but-
pretty much said it all. It's really about
Yeah.
those relationships. And then when, other people are against it, that's where those evaluations and the expertise of the people in the field come into play. But definitely, yeah, going in with that smile on your face, and then, being firm but kind if they're starting to push back. And then, it's really just knowing when you need to pull out that mama bear or daddy bear if it's needed. But most of the time, like Charla said, it's not, if you really walk in there and you know your stuff, and you appreciate what everybody is doing.
Definitely. And I want to give a shout out to Kathy Garza, if I haven't already, for these questions. These are great questions, Kathy, to get the conversation rolling. So yeah, the next question is, if you have a student who is working with print and Braille, since we were just talking about that, dual media at the same time, what are some ways you can support adequate instruction in both areas? And I think that's an interesting question. Is it sometimes hard for kids to balance both? How do you really make sure they're nurtured in that way?
So I can speak in terms of my experience with my students, and then also with my son. For me, a lot of it, if they're dual, I try to give them a lot of their content in large print or their main form, and just so that I know that they're getting the content that they need. And then I'm teaching them the Braille or the other pieces that might be needed. With technology pieces, I tend to build it more in, because most of our kids are pretty tech savvy. They pick up on it very quickly, and they are able to access that content knowledge and be able to manipulate the technology in order to get that access to it. And then it's more about teaching them the Braille. And then once they've got that Braille knowledge, then it's you're piping more Braille into some of that core content as they're progressing in their Braille skills and they're getting it. It is a hard balance, I think, in general education settings. I work in a self-contained classroom. So in my sense, my classroom is set up very differently than most gen ed settings, just because of the nature of the beast of where I am. And we're running into some of those issues with my son, who is in a general education setting, where finding that balance of he's getting pulled out for Braille, he's getting pulled out for other services, and then he still has to master all that core content. And so that's where you really have to come in, work with your team, work with your teachers, work with all the professionals, and find that perfect balance in terms of getting the services that your child needs, as well as that core content. But if it's a service that is needed and required, then it's going to help that child get that content in the long run. So while it may interfere and take some time out of that general educational classroom setting. It's going to help them have better access later.
For sure. Thank you, Kayla. Anyone else have something to add to that one?
Yeah, I'm gonna give some examples about how I've done some of this, but when I had a student who was younger, when she moved up into kindergarten, we had done, all the pre-Braille stuff in preschool, but when she moved up into kindergarten, we started doing, I worked with a teacher to determine when she would be using Braille in the classroom, even though she couldn't read it yet. So what we did is her reading curriculum had a follow along time. And so what I did was have the Brailleist Braille the book or the worksheets, whatever it was that she was reading for that follow along time. And then I had the print over the top, it was all interlined. And even though she couldn't read, I started having her follow along while the teacher was reading it, even if she wasn't exactly in spot, because my belief, and sometimes, beliefs aren't necessarily good or bad, but, is that even if you're not reading Braille yet, it needs to be available to some degree in the classroom. So, she learned to read in print, and she was getting Braille in the classroom, even though she couldn't read it. Just it's kinda similar to print. Even though she couldn't read print, she's still learning to read it. Then, but I would pull her out to teach her the Braille. And we just kind of increased as each year as she went further along through the grades, we would just add a little bit more Braille into the classroom. And that was also included in the writing. So when we got to writing, I can't remember what it was, second grade. Um, she would do a writing assignment in print one week because they did like a whole one writing assignment per week. So she would do one writing assignment in print, and then the next week it would be in Braille. And at the time, well, the embosser wasn't in her classroom. I don't have anybody who has an embosser in their classroom. I probably could do it, but I'm not. I don't. Um, what I did is she would write it on Perky Duck, and then the Brailleist would come and take it and emboss it for her, and then interline it and give it to the teacher. So she was reading um, print and Braille in the classroom, and writing with print and Braille in the classroom. And I just feel like if there's gonna be a dual media or a multimedia, all the medias need to be included somewhere within the day in a general education classroom.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on that one before we move on? I think this next question is pretty interesting, and I'm curious to know, what technology is available to support multimedia learners? I'm sure you all can answer this. And I know, Rebecca, you said you work with kind of like assistive tech, is that right?
I do. So one of my job duties, half of my job duties are devoted to assistive technology. So not only do I focus on the vision students in my district, I focus on communication, students in our general ed settings that need reading support, the whole entire thing. One of the tools that we have available that we use frequently, and it's not specific to vision, but we use Google Read and Write. That's one of the things that we have. And you can use it for a wide variety of different things. It has the ability to read to you. It has speech to text options. There's different things that can be done with it. It's a pretty underused resource in my district, and we're trying to change that. But we're trying with one of the students that I'm working with. She likes using the read aloud feature right now. She has a pretty low reading level, and it really helps her access some more of that text.
Awesome. So that's called Google Read and Write, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. What else? Anyone else have a favorite assistive tech that for multimedia? I mean, like we're in 2024. I know every year there's new things coming out and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so Hayden has a lot, and other students that I've worked with as well. But Hayden has a lot of technology that she uses. She has a lot of options. So one piece of technology that she used all throughout elementary school is the CCTV. And for those that don't know what a CCTV is, it's basically a flat screen with a document camera on it. And you can have the camera, some models at least, you can have the camera aimed down at your desk so you can zoom in on your paper and then you can see what you're writing really big, and it makes everything just really accessible. And then some models you can also aim it up towards the whiteboard and zoom in on the whiteboard so you can bring the board closer to you. And that's really, really helpful, especially once they get up into those like third, fourth, fifth, when they're doing a lot of like board to desk work, and they're not just doing circle times. It's really helpful. Also a Braille display. So I call it Braille whack-a-mole. I don't know how else to describe how a Braille display works, but the little dots pop up and they make the Braille sentence. And when you're done reading that line, you hit enter and the next line of Braille pops up with different dots. So they kind of pop up like whack-a-mole does. And then she's got, really low tech dome magnifier, although she prefers not to use a dome magnifier because of the glare from the lights. It really like bounces around in that glass, and it's a little much for her photophobia sometimes, but in dim lighting she loves to use a dome magnifier. And then she can use a digital handheld magnifier. Now, she doesn't always carry all of these things around with her all the time. She kind of picks and chooses based on what class she's going to. But she does have a digital handheld magnifier she can use. So if she happens to get something in small print, she can still access it. The iPad is an amazing tool. It opens up so many worlds. Like right now, she's in the middle school musical, and we were having a hard time figuring out how we were going to get her script to like not be huge and in front of her face while she's trying to act, right? Because she has to hold things really close to see them. And so we found out that you could import. We got the script from the production company. We imported the PDF into Apple Books, and she can just like flip through it like she can a regular script on the screen and zoom in. She can mark pages so she doesn't have to like try and scroll and find her spot again. So just I would say the iPad is the most diverse tool you can get. If you have to spend your money on one, I'd say iPad opens a lot of doors for our kids in multiple ways, and you can even use an iPad with a Braille display, which is really cool. So there's a lot of options out there, and it really is trial and error to find out what your kid likes to use and when. Some kids might only like large print, and that's totally okay. And there's some kids that are only going to like Braille, and then there's some kids that are only going to like digital, and it's going to be a big mixed bag for everybody else. So I think just really paying attention to what your student's willing to use, what they enjoy using, and what is helping their eye fatigue stay down, because as you all probably know, the headaches are real, and they can get really severe sometimes. Like Hayden has migraine level headaches pretty regularly if she's not using her tools properly. So yeah, that's kind of the tools that she has available.
Great. Kayla or Kathy, any other tools you want to shout out?
To kind of piggyback that, you're going to also run into where you have to deal with the district in terms of what does the district use. I fought for the longest time to get my son an iPad, and then they switched the younger kids over to Chromebooks. And so right after I got him this beautiful iPad Pro that he was learning how to use and loving it, they all switched over to these touch Chromebooks, and he no longer wanted to use the iPad because he didn't want to be different. And so I said, okay, let's see what there is. I said, he needs the largest Chromebook possible. And, like working with the assistive tech team, I didn't just walk in there and just demand. I said, what can you offer me? Because I try very hard to go in as a parent and not as a professional. This is, his TVI, his O&M, his team. I am just a part of it. Do I question and second guess and check stuff? I do. But I take the suggestions from the team first. And so we were able to get him a Chromebook, touchscreen, the largest size. They got him his own. And so far that's been working pretty well with the accessibility features that have been on there. He has been able to change and do contrast. He has been able to, see things in large print, and he can pinch and open things up and make things larger because it is that touch screen, and he doesn't need that mouse aspect yet. The other thing too, one thing that I've also I haven't personally used yet, but I have heard other people, especially in the older grades. I know you can do this on an iPad, but some people prefer a Kindle, and they can get their books and their texts on the Kindle, especially for those lit classes that have novels or different things like that. And then they already have their accessibility features on there because a lot of times it's their personal Kindle, and they can use that to do a lot of their reading as well. So that's just another option, but making sure that you not only are working with the district and the team, but knowing what your child needs, because there's a lot of options out there. He also uses a CCTV. He also uses all of a lot of the things. We're not at a Braille display yet for him, but a lot of the pieces that Charla mentioned. So I'm not going to repeat myself, but those are just a couple more options.
Yes, and Kathy Garza was saying in the chat, I encountered, she was, loves hearing Kathy's approach, the other Kathy. I encourage so many students who are documented dual media, but are not proficient in print or Braille because there's limited exposure. So having many tools in the toolbox is fantastic if the student knows how to use them efficiently, for sure. Yes. And that's why
I
it's so.
I want to say something about Kathy Garza's comment here. When I came to a new district this year, I had a student who was 5th grade, did not know how to read in print or Braille. And they were both being presented to her. And we had talked to the team, and actually the year before they were very concerned about this. So they had taken away they didn't really take it, but they did. They took away her Braille. And so when I came in, the parent was really hot, really mad, but she hadn't learned to read print or Braille because she was being pulled out of everything. And she was also being pulled out for O&M. So we backed up, and I told I didn't tell, I suggested to mom and to the student, because the student was making decisions about this as well. I said, let's not work on the Braille right now. We played Braille games once a week just to keep her just knowing the Braille. Now she's finally, this year, she is learning to read. She's actually gained, I'm going to say, probably a whole year this year in reading print, which is great. She has to know how to read. So it's really important that when you look at this, when you're putting a print and Braille together, that you have to make sure they're learning to read. Don't compromise, one because you want them to have both.
Absolutely. Very well said. What advice do you have for families and school teams considering print and Braille for their children? Kathy, you just kind of touched on that. Any advice you would give anybody, either from a parent perspective, professional perspective, whichever, both?
Yeah, kind of what I was talking about earlier about forging those relationships. It's just as important to forge relationships with the admin in your students' building as well as your vision teacher, because oftentimes the vision teacher might need a little backup. There are some times where a parent communicating their child's needs can make the boat move a little faster than if it's just the vision teacher asking or just the parent asking. But if they're both kind of on a team approaching admin, it can be really helpful sometimes. I've also found it really helpful to have a meeting directly with the principal and vice principal, explain what albinism is, how it affects Hayden's eyes. I even have these homemade like blind goggles, which are just science goggles that you put press and seal on. And while our kids aren't that visually impaired, at least most of the kids with albinism aren't that visually impaired, it gives them a sense of just having a visual impairment and the difficulty of accessing print with those goggles on, which they can't see anything with those on. So it's very effective very quickly. And I think just getting a little bit of a sense of empathy and so that they understand, because they're making decisions based on budget and what they know about vision, which is likely not much if we're being honest, because admins can't know everything about everybody, right? They have a very broad view. And so it really helps them understand, oh, when I'm making a decision for Timmy, or whatever your student's name is, that, oh, I remember mom came in with those goggles on. Oh, we definitely need to make sure that iPad gets here faster, right? Or we need to make, because he's not going to be able to read at all in class if he doesn't have this tool. And so I think just communicating the needs in a way where they can learn about your student is so empowering, not just for them, but also for your student in the building, because they feel safe and understood and respected in the hallways and in the classroom. And that makes a big difference in confidence.
Anyone else?
This kind of backtracks just a little bit, but it just popped into my head with when Charlotte mentioned the goggles too. And I know it's not necessarily just about the media, but some of the low tech pieces too are just like dimming the lights, having hats, like they make those light covers, just those pieces too that can completely change what a student needs and how they access their print. So for example, if you're doing an observation of somebody or even your child and you're in a brightly lit place and they're really struggling to read, and so then you're kind of sparking of, oh my gosh, do they need Braille? Should I be pushing more for this? It could be something simple where just altering the environment slightly can also impact all of those pieces. And so really just kind of taking that step back. So when you're making those decisions, we had the same kind of issue that Kathy brought up, a student who he was really struggling to learn to read. And so we questioned where should the focus be right now? And they called me in to get a second opinion as well from the teacher, and I sat down and we just kind of observed him, and we watched him, with how his Braille was progressing, because I hadn't worked with him in several years. So we kind of looked to see how his Braille was progressing. Is he able to really read it well? Does he have that tactile sense with his fingers? And then also taking into account where he was in terms of learning to read. So it can happen at any time, and just really taking that step back to look at all of the factors, not always just print and Braille, but also those environmental factors that can also play a huge role in impacting how a child can read and have access.
Thank you, Kayla. I would like to open it up to questions, but before that, any final thoughts, anything that's popped into anyone's mind throughout this that they want to share? I want to let you all say kind of everything you wanted to before we open it up.
I think it's important just to reiterate that, particularly in the albinism community, there is no one size fits all remedy for literacy for any of our kiddos. And I think some people get really passionate about one way and really passionate about the other way. And there's kind of this like, Braille's the best, no large print's the best kind of a thing going on. And I think as a community, it's really important that we keep the view more about what the individual's needs are and respect those needs, and that there's supports for everybody, regardless of how your child needs to read. There's support in this community for you. And I've noticed that kind of happening more often now, which is really nice to feel. As a mom of a child who uses dual media, it didn't always feel that way. And so I think it's really nice that the conversations are happening, and that there's not this, you have to learn Braille, or Braille's too much, you never need it, because the vision impairments with albinism, it's such a large spectrum. As we know, like there are people that can drive and they don't really need large print even. And then there's some people that really have almost no functional vision at all and are guide dog users and cane users and Braille full-time users. And so, and then there's everybody in between. So I just want everybody to know that there's support for every student, regardless of what media that they need or they like to use.
For sure. Any other final comments? Well, our panelists have been great, but we're not done yet. We will definitely be happy to take any questions, either in the chat, or you can all turn on your cameras now, if you would like, and we will be here to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us this evening. That was very informative, and you all came very well prepared. I appreciate that. Lots of good information was shared. And I think the technology piece, because like was mentioned, kids are learning technology faster than adults these days. um, and I think the technology piece is really going to play a bigger role moving forward. Even I guess my question to each of you is, as the educators and as the advocates for your children, how difficult is it to really know what's out there and what might work best? I mean, I know it's a team to kind of decide that, but I think as a parent, it may be helpful if there is some tips or tricks that we can share to kind of let parents educate themselves a little bit too, and kind of have them bring something to the table as well. If anybody wants to share, if there's anything that we could share as like a
I actually am
resource.
interested in hearing what Rebecca has to say, because you're in technology, but I can share what I do. So I kind of have a standard that I go off of, just to start with. But I learn every year more and more technology that's out there, not just through conferences, but also looking at the websites. Like Apple has a ton of apps for the visually impaired, and they're most of the time they're free, and they're very helpful. Like, I just absolutely love seeing AI when a kid has a book, and they aren't able to see it because it's too small a print. All they have to do is snap that picture and it'll just read it right to you, right on the iPad. So I have some standards, but I always keep up on what else is out there, not just through conferences again, but just through looking at some of the websites. And I will sometimes go to APH. Actually, I go there all the time, but I look at APH a lot to see what else they have. And so I get a lot of ideas that way. But it really is important. And it's so hard because there's so much that we have to do as vision teachers. And we have to know low vision, we have to know Braille, for us to know O&M, we have to know O&M, we have to understand, kids with multiple impairments who might be working with people like Rebecca, who has low vision, but also needs to have some physical supports with their technology. So there's always just so much. And there are times it's overwhelming, but I try to do the best I can just to keep up with what's out there.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I would say I have my kind of my go-tos, right? And you have your conferences. I also talk to other parents. On some of these sites, like even our NOAA parent groups, there's several of them. I see people posting questions about different pieces of technology, or posting, oh, hey, this is something that's working great for my child. So not only am I getting it from a professional standpoint by, my professional context, but I'm also looking from a parent perspective of what are other districts doing? What have they found that I have not found yet? They've just recently they've come out with these amazing Braille displays that are creating pictures. We just got one that I get to play with, and I'm super excited about it.
Is that the Monarch, Kayla?
No, the Monarch hasn't come out yet. It's the
Okay.
Catalyst. It's called a
Oh,
Catalyst.
yeah.
It's from a different company, but it's a 4 square, and you can play these really cool games with them and tracking. I'm so excited. It's in the high school, so I don't get full access to it, but I can play with it some. But the technology is just always growing, and like you said, apps and Androids are even coming. Are catching up with a lot of the technology pieces as well. So just kind of following people. Basic Google searches come up with quite a bit too, but also knowing some of your regular sites like APH and some of the other, having those backups and that kind of list to go to, so that you can get an idea of what's out there. And then, always ask the questions, ask other people in the community, or any other contacts that you feel comfortable asking, so that you can walk in to those meetings asking some of those questions and saying, oh, hey, have you heard about this? Because sometimes, like Kathy said, we're swamped. Every profession is swamped, right? There's so many little pieces that we have to know, that sometimes a parent can come in and make a suggestion and we're like, that's a great one. I hadn't thought of that. Or let me look into that more because I don't even know about that. How'd you hear about that? And then it's even more of that team effort when you bring in that parent in that regard too, and they're like, yes, I knew something, and it just kind of boosts their self-esteem too, so you have that contact and that connection. So just any way you can find the technology, do it, because there's definitely not a one place or a one size fits all in terms of trying to keep up with that.
I see Kathy Garza has her hand raised, but Rebecca or Charlotte, anything else to add to that question?
No, that's pretty much what I do. I am a member of a ton of like Facebook groups. I don't usually like post or respond to many of them, but I will sit there and I will read different posts just to see what other people are doing, what they're trying. There's an assistive technology group that I'm in, and I will just sit there and I will read different things that they are trying for different people of all different kinds of needs. And I'll think about kids that I'm working with and see if I can make that work for us. I'll do internet searches. I will contact some of the manufacturers and things that I have connections with and just see what else is out there. Android is definitely starting to catch up. Google actually has a newer product that they are, it's similar to Seeing AI. It's called Google Lookouts. So it is similar. It's working its way up there. It's probably not on that same scale yet, but it's working there. So they're trying to catch up for people that are using different platforms. So it's ever evolving and something that we just have to keep researching.
Awesome, thank you. Kathy, you have your hand raised, Kathy Garza. There are two Kathys,
Yeah.
so I keep saying your last name.
Yeah, I was just curious, and I know this could be its very own Noah call. And I am not volunteering to do it, but I'm curious for kind of some of you guys from the professionals about the role about the role that evaluation and progress monitoring play in all of this, because and the reason I ask this is not to open a can of worms or anything, but because I see kids all over the state. No, I don't do direct care, but I go consult with schools, and we see a lot of kids. Kathy, something that you said made me think of this. We see a lot of kids who are struggling in print and in Braille, and everybody for years is going back and forth saying, well, it's because they can't see the print. Well, it's because they don't have enough Braille instruction. And what really happens is maybe they have dyslexia or some other learning difficulty or learning disability that has been undiagnosed, and just thinking about the importance for families and educators to understand that kids with visual impairments are not exempt from those other things as well. And so I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are about the importance of that progress monitoring and evaluation and things like that for these kids.
Just from a parent's perspective, because I'm a Brailleist, so I don't do evaluations, I just produce Braille. But from a parent's perspective, I can say that the progress reports and the monitoring is essential to everything. Because it's really easy for kiddos to slip through the cracks and then kind of just float. And so I am interested to hear what the TVIs have to say about this, but I would say that from an experience that we've had with progress monitoring not happening when it needs to, it made a huge impact on the success of Hayden's ability to use her different medias. And there was definitely a huge slippage in one area. And as soon as it got monitored and documented, then it was like, oh, we need to bring this back up. And so I think it's super important that evaluations and progress reports are done regularly. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, they're super important. That's how we can qualify anybody for services to start with. So, those evaluations are key in getting any child the services that they need. And then that progress monitoring lets us know if something is working or not. You know, we have to know, is this strategy working? Is this piece working? So yes, this could be a whole nother call. And so I'm not going to dive too far into it because it's an entire call. And I think I am doing a session with Ann Korn and Marjorie Wood on this topic at NOAACon. So I'll just plug NOAA, the conference. But it's it's huge, and it lets everybody know that you are still working on pieces with your child, those students, and you say that, oh, hey, you read all these forms and these documents and it says, oh, 120 minutes, X number of times a month, or whatever the time is on the IEP. But those monitors and those paperwork that goes home, is it daunting for us? Absolutely. But it's important, one, to keep that relationship open, letting parents know if that is the only communication that you have with the families or with the teachers or the TVI, which I hope to goodness it's not. But if it is, it's showing that things are still happening. It can show if there's a gap. It can show if there's questions. And data talks. Data talks. It's how you're going to get anything and everything that you need. If you don't have the data to support it, it's going to be a much harder battle. And while we always say we don't like these assessments and things like that, there's other ways to get it from just the tests. But it's a super important piece to the puzzle.
Joanna, I just want to let you know, I see you. I see your hand raised, but any other final thoughts on that question before we take Joanna's question?
I was just going to kind of say something about that question. So I'm a parent. I jumped in late. I apologize for jumping in late. But I'm a parent of a boy with albinism, and he's in college. He's a sophomore in Virginia Tech in engineering. But I'm also a TVI. And I think in the TVI world, what I've found as a parent and as a TVI is we switch caseloads in where I'm at. We can switch caseloads yearly. So sometimes your child doesn't have the consistency of the same TVI, and they could be completely thinking something differently, like, oh, well, this person should be doing this, or this should be. So I think that's a big problem in the TVI world. And really the only consistent person in that equation is the parent. So as a parent, I was always kind of the gatekeeper, saying, well, this is what we did last year, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work, and this is what we should try. So kind of as a follow-up to that question, just really encouraging our parents to really stay on top of everything. Although the TVI is the professional, it's just, it could be, inconsistent.
Definitely, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little, I'm glad to hear you have enough TVIs to do that. But I was in a district where I had it was a pretty big district. I had 70 students, and we weren't able to get another TVI, and we had a lot of the same problems that you were talking about, Joanne. It's like there's absolutely no possible way that I'm able to keep up with 70 students. So I almost did triage, I guess, picking which kids are going to get the most of the service. So usually it was, Braille users and dual media users. So I'll tell you, it's important though, because when the parents came in and said, hey, my kid's not getting this or that, they're going to pay to, the TVIs are going to pay attention to the parent. And it's sad to say that, but it's how it works. Oh, and I'm not in the district with 70 kids anymore.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else? Oh, did I just hear something?
Yeah, I was just saying, whew, for
Oh.
Kathy not being in a district with 70 kids anymore.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're
Also, speaking of technology, iPads, good time to plug that NOAA actually has an iPad assistance program for people who might not have access to that technology. So keep an eye out on our website, albinism.org. iPad would be where you'd go to look up the information for that. We do it once a year and give out a handful of iPads to people who apply who might need them. So that's a really cool thing that
So-
Noah is able to do.
Casey, I just tried to do that not long ago for one of my students with albinism, and it wouldn't even let me like register.
The 2024 application is not set yet, Joanna.
Okay.
Check back in about 2 weeks, probably.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely check back.
Casey, can I just mention something really quick?
Sure.
So I wanted to encourage you guys for parents that have students that are using both Braille and large print. There's something called interlining. And it is where the print is above or below or wherever your TVI puts it. Everyone has a preference. But there's print alongside the Braille on the page. And most of the time it's handwritten, and some districts have access to a machine that can do both. I have a machine that can do both. And I wanted to show it to you. Just hold on. Let me see if I can turn off my background here. Okay, so my machine does this. So I can actually like print large print. So this is size 28. And then I can also Braille at the same time. And then also all of the shapes, hold on, let me see where all of the shapes are also tactile. So all of the lines that print out are also Brailled. And so it makes it really nice for a student that's learning Braille. And because if they get lost on the page, it's really easy for them just to pull the paper close and find where they were and keep going. So I would encourage you, if you have a dual media student, to advocate for interlining on their work, on their Braille while they're still learning, because it's a really important tool.
It's also really nice for the younger students, for their teacher to be able to help them with the work.
Yes.
You don't always have to have a Braille proficient person there, reading the Braille.
It's great to advocate for that with your district admin, and the way to advocate for that is, I'm going to save you money because my kid's not going to need a one-on-one para in class anymore, because the print's already on the page and the teacher can just walk by and help them just like they would any other student. And that tends, when you talk budget, that tends to motivate people.
It's also helpful from a parent perspective, because let's face it, if your kid's learning Braille, most parents are not learning Braille at the same time. So that interlining when it comes home, if there's practice, if your kid's wanting to practice, you can follow along with your child as they're reading the Braille as well. So not only is it beneficial for the child, it's also really beneficial for the parents, so that you have an idea of what your child's working on too.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad you got to show us that.
I am so jealous, Charlotte, of that machine. I want
know.
one.
That's what I was
So
saying
bad.
earlier.
If anybody wants
So-
to know what it's called a spot dot.
And it's so nice
It's
because
dreamy.
I work with a student who she produces Braille for, and I push in for math in her class, and I'll tell you, that has made a huge difference in how she's able to learn math. And I mean, it's absolutely wonderful, and the student loves it. She doesn't have very much vision, but she just feels so much like everybody else when she has that graphic
Yeah.
in Braille and in print, and she can shade it in all by herself with her pencil or her crayon. It's amazing.
That's
I know,
so
I want, and it's so much like, it would be such a time saver because then I don't have to
It
go in
is.
Braille, and then I have to interline, and then I
It
have to
cuts the
figure out
time in half, honestly.
graphic, and
Yeah.
I'm just like,
That is
so
awesome.
I'm insanely jealous.
I got it on eBay for a really good
Oh,
price.
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't pay full price for it. I got it from a family in Texas who their child, the Braille just wasn't working out for, and they decided to list it. And I was like, okay, these are usually really expensive machines, and that's a reasonable price. And I private contract Braille, so I was like, that's a great business investment for me. So I grabbed it. And it really is a great machine. But if your district is going to buy an embosser because your student is a Braille user, suggesting the spot dot as their choice is a really great option because it can do that. So,
But the only thing that about spot dot, and I'm not sure if this is true anymore, it only does a regular size 8.5 by
Yeah.
11 paper. So
does.
I have I have an APH embosser if we need something in the larger 11 by 11.5. So I have a Braille program, Braille 2, that I use 11.5 on. So we can go either way.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very
Can
nice.
you buy that using quota funds?
The embosser?
Yeah, the spot dot.
No, that's my personal business that I purchased that for. I don't know if you can use quota funds. Each state is different. So like I'm in the state of Washington and our school for the blind uses the quota funds for us and then we can rent things from them. So it's
Okay,
not
I
on an
see.
individual basis for us, but in other states, I know they do it differently. So you'd really have to check with your state authority to figure out if you're able to use the funds to order one or not. But I do know that some are quota fund eligible on the APH website.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it depends on the embosser. I don't
Mhm.
believe Spot Dot is APH. So you'd have to look at the different
Yeah.
ones, unfortunately.
Tim
Okay,
says
I've never seen it on the it doesn't
It's-
sound familiar to me on the APH
Yeah,
quota
that one.
fund.
APH does have other ones.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
Tim says
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this
Great
brand
class.
is View Plus Tiger. So the View Plus website is where you can find the Spot Dot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Very cool. Kim says APH has partnered with Humanware to bring an embosser to quota for the first time ever. Meet Page Blaster. Ooh, all one word. Trademark. Very cool.
I just ordered a page blaster because I can pay with quota funds. And it actually arrived to me broken.
Oh no.
I know. So it's been a hassle trying to get, but I think that's just a fluke. But
Yeah, I
hopefully,
I got a page blaster, not a print blaster, but I think that Kim,
it
you meant
works
page
fine.
blaster. Yeah, yeah, mine
Uh,
works great. It's wonderful. I'm gonna have to figure out how to get it maintained because I think it's time to like clean it out and stuff. And I haven't did that yet, but yeah, I
yeah.
have that one.
All right.
Just speaking
Good.
of quota funds, I just thought of a piece of technology that we didn't mention. It can be a little glitchy, but it's a smart brailler. And this one's really cool, especially for like littler kids, like kindergarten, first grade range. And it actually says the letter as you braille it on the brailler out loud. And you can adjust this. There's this little screen that actually types it out in print on the screen as well as embossing it on paper at the same time. And it's kind of a cool little piece of technology. They can be a little glitchy sometimes with when you're pushing down the keys, whether or not it gets the right letter. So if you have a kiddo who might get really frustrated with that, I know that Hayden was one of those kiddos where like if she pushed, the letter B and it didn't push the letter B, she'd be like, I pushed the letter B, mom. Like, why isn't it saying it's a B? But if you have a kiddo who's pretty patient and is okay with things not working 100% of the time, and they just want to use it as like an additional support. I've tutored students with a smart brailler and it's been really effective for some students. So something to think about.
Those smart braillers also, they have a print option, so you can take it to a printer, plug it in, and it'll transcribe it into print and print it out on paper so the teacher can see it as well. But every one I have right now, they don't work, and it frustrates me because I want to use one.
Well, a few people are having to sign off. Any final questions from anyone? Thank you so much to our panelists. That was so great. We do have this call recorded, so if anyone knows of anyone who wasn't able to see it, we will email this out to all the attendees. And just thank you so much for being here, everyone. This was very informative. We're really grateful to you. Karen says thank you. Catherine says thank you. A lot of people in the chat saying
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everybody, too.
So thank you all so much.